Hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Be Inspired, our weekly dose of inspirational, magical show, another inspirational figure in the British Bangladeshi community. Now, the British Asian community are known for pursuing kind of the traditional work, doctor, lawyer, engineer. Well, this evening, I've got somebody who's a mixture of everything because he's a man of I was going to say of endless talent, but I'll let you be the judge of that. I've got this amazing architect who's worked with some of the biggest names in the architectural world in the world, who is now running his global company of recruiting architects. But not only that, he's been awarded a top mentor for young people in London, a visiting fellow professor, a soon to be doing his own kind of well-being on Spotify, I should say, kind of messages and videos and inspirational talks. So it's with great pleasure that I'm able to have him on our show this evening to talk about his experience, his life journey, and hopefully will be an inspiration to all those people who've just received the good news of the A-level results. So without a further ado, let me introduce to you to my special guest this evening, Del Hossain. Del, welcome to Be Inspired.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be invited.
No, absolutely. Look, I've been chasing you for all summer, more or less. So it's a really honor to have you. And I'm a big fan of yours, right? That goes without saying. From the days that we met through BBPI, I've been taken back because one of my secret passion was that I love architecture. I love obviously modern stuff, but I also love the old stuff. And what an amazing talent that you have, because you are a person, a British Bangladeshi, working at the highest level of architecture. So I try to do an introduction, which I know didn't do justice. So why don't I hand over to you to kind of draw your own, sorry, I'm trying to be, draw your own sort of early start of career.
You're very kind. Thank you. I actually began, like I think a lot of Bangladeshi people, in the north of England. And my father originally was an engineer. But at that time, when he came here, you really couldn't make a living if you were not British at that point in engineering. So he ended up setting up restaurants like so many Bangladeshi people. And I guess that's where the entrepreneur starts in a lot of Asian business people. We set up businesses because we needed a break, we needed an opportunity. And that's really where it began, because my dad would look at buildings, I would go to look at them, and before you know it, we were converting, I don't know, a fish and chip shop into a little takeaway. And then before you went a little bit further, we were converting churches into restaurants. And big Methodist chapels and really beautiful buildings, and really bringing out the quality of it. And my dad said to me, well, look, you can't keep doing this. The reason I do this is so you don't have to do this. And I was quite happy doing it, because the passion was finding buildings and making them exciting and dynamic. And for me, that was wonderful. So I came to London and I came to study architecture, because it seemed to be the only thing that I could see that was exciting. And that's where my journey began, to be an architect, I think. And then after I came to, I've had in a very nutshell, really, after I became an architect, I realized what I liked about architecture wasn't necessarily just the building part, but it was about the engagement with people. What is it that makes people ultimately feel good? And then I entered what I call my second career as a positive psychologist, really. And a lot of what I do now with my business, Adrem Group, is we look at organizations, and we look at well-being, we look at recruiting, and I tend to coach a lot of the top design leaders, really. And I'm still very much involved with design, but I'm involved with a lot of things now. So my journey is about getting the best out of people, what they can achieve, what they can do, how they're inspired, and making them ignited, because I think people have got so many great qualities about them. And I think as a Bangladeshi, when we lived in the north of England in a place called St. Helens, there were really no Asian people. We were the
Without prying, obviously you look
yeah,
younger than me, right? So
yeah.
we're talking about the 70s here, okay?
Yeah, we are talking about the 70s.
Where we know, from our own history in London, the plight of the rise of the far right, the BNP, the racist, the murder of Al-Tabali. I mean, this is you and a family in Northwest, even more detached, even more sort of, away from a support structure. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure a lot of our younger viewers will not necessarily experience that level of isolation in some respect from the wider community.
I mean, it's really interesting when I think about it. When you look at those kind of programs, like films like East is East, it was our upbringing. That's kind of where we were. It was like the terraced houses, cobble street roads, and we were the Indians. And I remember walking in the town with my mum wearing her shari and my sister, and somebody came over and said to my mum, "What are you?" And she said, No one understood what a Bangladeshi was at the time, because we'd only been independent for about 2 years or something, And she said, "Well, we're Indian." And the first thing this person thought was, "What, like cowboys in India?" He didn't even know what an Indian was. That's how remote we were. And we grew up in this town, which I have really lovely, fond memories of. But when I look back on it, I kind of realized how alienated we were. So we would go to places like say the nearest mosque would be in Liverpool, which was about 12 miles away.
Wow.
And we would go there, you'd do your kind of like shopping, your halal chicken shopping and stuff. And you would see people from different communities, because in those times, the mosque we went to, which was in Toxteth, you may recall the Toxteth riots, it was like everyone, Algerian, Arabian, Somalian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, anyone from the world who had come from that kind of foreign background. So we grew up with that, and then we would go, to places like Bradford, I suppose. We had a business there as well, and that was quite different, because that was the other side. We had a lot of Asian community there. But as a result of that, I ended up being very, I suppose, very Western in a sense, in that I got into things like rugby quite heavily, and ended up playing rugby for counties and things, and then ended up sprinting. So I was very much a sportsman, and I think because at the time there were no other representations of foreign people, I represented anyone that was foreign, really. Chinese, Afro-Caribbean community. Was there. I remember being in a lesson and the teacher saying to me, and it was a question, I don't know, about Mongolia or something, and I didn't really know. And the teacher said, "Well, Dad, you're foreign. You should know about this." I'm like, "Yeah, of course, because we know about the whole world, don't we? We don't just know about our bit, we know the whole world." So it was really fascinating to have that exposure. And then you return to London. You come to London when I came for university, and I thought, wow, amazing. There's so much going on here. There's so many communities, so many languages, so many smells in the air, so much vibrancy. And I felt this is home. It was really exciting.
But thank you for that. I just thought it would be really good to get that experience of growing up. I mean, we talk about the difficult times, but this was, difficult in a lot of sense. So I guess the entrepreneurship started from early age. I mean, your father, like many of our inspirational story figures, there is somewhere there in the DNA is the rice and curry. It's the backbone. I mean, even to this day, 10,000 plus Bangladeshi-owned restaurants, some still sadly known as Indian, but, it's the norm in some respect, but employing over 100,000 people, in difficult times, but in the good times, it's a £4.5 billion industry.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just box standard, like you said. You're looking for quirky places. Your dad was an engineer. You had a spark or flair of architecture. So you would get a building, you will make it up, you will redesign, and you would make structure, obviously structurally safe, but you'll make it appealing. So the idea of the entrepreneurship did it sort of come from your father, or did you sort of also have that passion?
I think I had the passion. I just liked opportunities. I could see opportunities, even in school, just making things and selling things. When I think when I was at school, we do the thing where if you go to an Indian shop in the weekend, I'd come back and you could get those little sugar sweets that look like diamonds.
Yeah.
And but you couldn't buy those in conventional shops.
No.
And so I'd find myself saying, "Do you want to buy sugar?" Or things like this, little things, just because they looked different and it was sufficiently interesting. And if you think about it, at that time, sweet shops didn't really have a great deal of stuff. So it was like kind of anything really, and then making things and selling things. And so that was always part of, I think, what I did. And I think the other thing I really enjoyed was within communities, within people. I found that in my town, we had a lot of, you were talking about racism, we had a lot of National Front. So I would walk through the town, I would be the token Asian person, and I would get chased through the town, So when I'd get chased, I became faster. And it was a little bit like the scene from Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Your love for rugby, which means you're strong, and then you've got the athletic sort of sprint to sort of get away from the Skinners. It all worked out really well. Now you're sprinting down to London because you've got to do a 7-year course at UCL, right?
Yeah.
It's a big commitment, 7 years. Now I want to raise this because, as we said, this government has done a U-turn, and I'm very much hoping that a lot of the British Asian, particularly our British Bangladeshi students who have done, not sat because there was no sitting for exams, but have now received the rightful grades that the teachers who know them best. They've studied with the teachers for some time in schools for 5 years and 2 years at a sixth form, have now got the right grades. Now, if there's a young person, and I know a lot of young people watch our show and have commented on how inspirational they found the previous speakers, but if there's a cohort of youngsters watching tonight and think, you know what, I want to be the next Dale, I want to be an architect, I want to know, it's a 7-year commitment, first of all. I guess when you did it, even when I was a student, one of my good friends was trained to be an architect. It was pretty much free, but now you got to pay. It's a 7-year commitment. What message, what advice, and what experience can you share with a budding wannabe architect today?
I think there's a number of things. One, does it fundamentally drive you? Are you passionate about it? Passion carries you a long way. When the money isn't always there, it's the passion that keeps you going. You have a belief. You think this is inspiring. A lot of people chase the money and they do things which are sometimes quite soulless. And I think the unfortunate thing is when you do that, you get to a point in life and your end goal is you're thinking, well, I'll earn enough just so I don't have to do anything. But at that point, your life is over. And it's better, the journey is more important than the end goal sometimes. So the journey has to be inspiring. So if you are prepared to, architecture is long hours. You work long and you work late. You sometimes work on amazing projects, but sometimes you work on basic stuff just to pay the bills. But even in that, you can find some beauty in a project. You can have your what we call money shots in certain areas to make a project look stunning and transformative. And you think, I went from architecture to psychology, positive psychology, because I like the hit of people going into a place and going, wow, this is cool. I like that, but I like that more than the designing and the building in a way. because I like the human emotion, I like the engagement. So I kind of thought, well, why can't you just get that from any manner of things in life, from different people, from different stories? And so I would say, sorry, I've detracted from your question, which was what
No.
would I say to a student? Well, first of all, to the students, I'm so happy for you. Actually, the change in the A-level results. Hopefully, you've all got something you wanted to get. And I think the algorithm idea and doing it according to postcode was an appalling idea. I'm a senior lecturer at UCL in architecture and engineering, actually, as well. And when I look at the students, it's not they're there because they're from all walks of life. They're from um, really humble upbringing because they had a passion, and they're from really kind of quite well-to-do places as well. But the thing they have in common is they have a passion for the subject. So I think if you have a passion, it's the essence of any good career, really.
Mm.
So I think for all those students out there, whether you're doing architecture, whether you're doing anything else, your mum and dad might tell you to go and do something. A lot of mum and dads won't like hearing this. And that's all very well because there's an element of their self-esteem and their pride, or they never got the chance and they don't want their kids to do, something that they never could do. But the reality is this is your life and you should make the best of it. And too many people realize a little bit too late. And I think what you have to do is you have to say, well, look, if I care for it, like any art, if you, even if you want to study acting or something, you've got to be the best actor. You can't just get by. You've got to be the best at whatever you do. And it is a bit like that old, Henry Ford line, like whatever you do, be the best at whatever you do. If you're going to be a street cleaner, be the best at it. And that's passion, having passion to do what you do. Because then you'll end up, not only will you end up owning your broom, you'll own a 1,000 brooms, and 1,000 people will be working with you, alongside you. You'll be then dealing with their emotions and their leadership, and before you know it, you're Johnson and Johnson or something, and that's what it is. It's a passion to take anything and make it fantastic. And I think a lot of people want the kids to get into a good company. I get that. And the idea of getting a good job, I also get that. But I also think there's tremendous merit, and you learn so much in actually just doing your own business. Where you are. One of the things I did when I was at university, I set up a poncho business called Wild Roach. And the idea of and we had a really interesting thing. We would buy cloth from Brick Lane, and I had a friend who was a very handsome Italian guy, 6'2", square jaw, and I was very good at sewing. So we would make it, we'd put it on, he would put it on, he would wear it, he looked amazing. We sold so many.
Yeah.
And but it was a student job, but it made money, and it made me think at the time that actually it's to do with marketing, branding, the idea, and having a product. And I think when you go into whatever you go into, just remember, even in a good job, there's internal marketing. You're marketing to your boss.
Yeah.
You're marketing to those around you. You'll always have competition internally. Yeah, and then I think the leadership in internal competition is knowing you're there to help other people. And if you go with that mentality, and I've always had this view that if I offer you everything, then you can take nothing from me. And if you do take something from me, it's only because I give it to you anyway. So mentally, you have a sense of well-being, you have a sense of strength and power. Whereas I think a lot of people feel I have to keep something tight, and people are taking things, and they feel disempowered. And I think whatever you're doing, whether you're a student, whether you're running a business, whether you're a professional in whether it's an architect or an accountant or an engineer or a doctor even, there's competition. competition for doctors to succeed in a marketplace. There's always, we're now seeing right now so much about Black Lives Matters, and there's a platform now for I think maybe some of the things that have happened for minority communities, which they couldn't say before. And I think generation like maybe my generation and Abdal, I think probably your generation, we would possibly be a little bit more accepting of it and take it, slap me on the face and I'll give you the other cheek.
Yeah.
And I think now there's a generation that says, well, why should we do that?
Should we? Yeah. It's not sort of stand up and be counted,
Be counted.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think young people listening, and I hope the parents as well, the advice is quite crucial, in the sense that, yeah, we all want to be, well, in your case, you did engineer stroke architect, but, doctors, lawyers, and so forth. So you got to go with what you're passionate about. And that's the thing. And if you can turn the passion into an income, great. But let's talk a little bit about you post-university life, because qualified from one of the most prestigious universities in the country with an architectural degree, you sort of start going about. But then how did you land yourself with, I don't know if he was then Sir Norman Foster, or did he become? Yeah. He was. So how did you land yourself as a, well, we just talked about Black Lives Matters, about BME being representative in all walks of life in British society. But at that time, probably a very handful of minority to be working for one of the world's leading architectural firm. How did you end up there? And tell us about your journey there.
After I finished university, I met my wife in university.
Who's also an architect?
She's also an architect. She was studying architecture. And, she's a Bangladeshi woman architect, really. And we decided to go off and learn about our cultural heritage. So we went off to Bangladesh to just travel, really, and look around at things that we'd heard about our parents talking about. And when we came back, we landed in Manchester, in my parents' house in what was Wigan at the time. And we got a job in a practice in Manchester. And the practice was a very nice practice, and they did schools. So in a short space of time, we were designing schools, both of us. And the only thing that was lacking was we found we were missing friends, we were missing the energy. And so every weekend we would drive up to London just to meet up with people, really go to an exhibition, go to an event, see something. And I think about 7-8 months went, and I said, we're in London every weekend. What are we doing? This is like crazy. We're going on Friday night. We're coming back on Sunday night. Why don't we just move there? So we both moved to London, and I got a job with a chap called Professor Hans Henlein, who's a really lovely man and mentor, actually, he was for a long time for me. And he's a German architect. And Fazana got a job with a company called BJ, who actually have probably designed more buildings along the River Thames than any practice I know. They do a lot of those kind of big housing projects. And she became very good at that. And I'd worked there for a few years and got to know how to build buildings. And then eventually, one thing, while we went to find ourselves in Bangladesh, we also took a trip around India, and we ended up in Jaipur. Wow. And we saw a sign in the window, and it was like a guest house that overlooked the Taj Mahal. And the sign in the window said, if you're an architect, come and see the owner of the hotel. So we thought, wonderful, we'll do that. And we went to see him, and it was a chap who was a wing commander for Indira Gandhi at the time. He's retired, and this was his pension. And he said, well, how long are you here for? And we said, we're here for maybe about 2 days. He said, stay as my guest while you're here. And at the end of the time, tell me what you think I can do with the hotel. We ended up being there for weeks, really, and we designed his hotel. Wow. We designed the rooftop bar and everything. that you can overlook the Taj Mahal, and we were just literally out of uni, and in India at the time, they kind of liked the fact that you'd come from the UK, you have this UK education, it has a lot of value around the world, and I think British architecture around the world is probably seen as probably the most pioneering. The British have gone all over the world and have been very good. They've built Dubai, they've built most of Hong Kong, and a lot of China. They've gone into Africa and done stuff, and I think they're amongst the best. So we did that, and then eventually came back to England. And then while we were in London, anyway, sorry to jump back to London, I got a call from a friend who said, "You know what? We're looking for someone that might be kind of a bit like you. Do you want to come and see us?" And I thought, really, Norman Foster? Wow, okay. So I went with my portfolio, and a director that met me at the door, he said, "Why do you want to come here?" And I said, "I know how to build buildings, but I've never built a building in glass and steel, and it's a bit like a dream for me to design with those kind of materials. It's just, And he thought I was kind of funny because I was just really straightforward, and I wasn't trying to, be very kind of giving him a different idea of anything philosophical or anything. I just love glass and steel buildings. Oh yeah, come on. So he said, "Right, fine, start Monday."
Wow. Interview on the spot, I guess. A job on the spot. Yeah.
I think he saw that I was enthusiastic, and I think that's another thing for students. There is nothing like enthusiasm, and the older you get, the more people lose enthusiasm. And if you can keep it, it keeps you younger. It keeps you vibrant, and it keeps you energized, and you will always seem like somebody that when you are in interviews, when you are going for that job, when you're going for that position in university or something, or anything, you will always feel like the person that they think it wouldn't be great to have them here. And I think it's infectious, really. And I think people in decision-making positions, they love the idea of having people with energy and enthusiasm. And if you have some experience as well, then you're in a really wonderful position because you can back up your energy and enthusiasm,
experience, and have gravitas in your command of your what you're doing. So tell us about life. I mean, in Foster's. I mean,
okay.
We now know you're there, and enthusiasm. Obviously your experience has got you there. But when you're there, what's it like to work in one of the world's leading architecture firms?
I think at the time they were the number one practice in the world, but possibly still are. This was at a time when the gherkin hadn't been made. It was at a time when the GLA, the mayor's office, hadn't been made. So all of those projects were being made, and the office was half the size it is now. It's about 580 people, I think, which is still huge for an architect. And I remember looking on every table, and it was kind of like banks of tables, maybe about 20 people on a table, and 20 people would work on a project. And each table you went on was another world-class project. You'd look down the table and you'd go, well, there's a skyscraper, there's something that's an unusual shape, there's something that's in the middle of, and it was like an absolute pleasure to have this visual kind of stimulus of people from all over the world, and because they do pick people from all over the world, you'd have like a bunch of people who at lunchtime would be speaking in Italian, another group speaking in Mandarin, another group speaking in Polish, and at the time there was just me and one other person, and the other person was, I think, Punjabi, and he'd been there a few years, and we were the only two Asian people there. And I remember somebody on my second day, and I'm at my desk, the new boy, and this chap came up to me, and he looked up and down the room, came straight over to me, and he said, "Do you play cricket?" And I thought, why would you ask me that? Why didn't you ask him? And I said, "I play rugby." He said, "But you play cricket, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "No, not really." And he said, "Oh." And he walked off in disgust. But,
Something so much.
yeah.
So look, I mean, as I said, I had some experience with a friend going around summer while he was doing his project at university, looking at wonderful marbling at buildings and, doing sketches and photos and stuff. So one of the things you're there at the best, the world's leading, although I was going to ask, who's your personal favorite, Richard Rogers or Norman Foster? But I won't ask you to sort of.
I would be guillotined by the other.
I know. I mean, I have to say, at one time I met both those gentlemen at events, and I literally shook one of their hands. I said, "You know what? I'm so honored to meet your hands because you designed some of the most amazing." He looked at me as though like I'm crazy, but it was for me as a personal, having learned so much about them through my friend. I want to talk a little bit about. So you're at the best firm in the world, right? So if you're a lawyer, you're at the top, top magic firm. As an architect, you are at the top. Where does the idea of Adrem come in, that you think, what, I've done the best I can with the best in the world, I want to now go and do my own stuff? So
yeah.
your initial, from an early age, your entrepreneurial, selling those wonderful fancy looking suites at school to make an extra money, selling the design, sort of your Italian designer friend, making stuff at university, making extra money. I mean, you've got it in you, right? But where did they think, what, I'm going to leave the comfort of the world's firm to go and do my own thing? Where did that come?
I think I just finished a project. We'd be doing crazy hours, and I had a capacity. I sleep very little, so I just done the stint where I'd done about 4 days of non-stop work, through the night, through the day, through the night, through the day, in the office drawing a project. And then eventually the project was finished, and I kind of thought, that it? You kind of, it's a bit like really revising for an exam, and then you've done the exam, and you don't get that jubilation that you feel you should. You graduate, and you're like, yeah, is that it?
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a deflation, really, which is why I say the journey is better than the end goal sometimes. And at that point, I thought, well, why don't I just set up a practice? So Fazana and I set up a practice, and Fazana, my wife, she's brilliant. She's a brilliant person anyway, but she's a brilliantly tolerant person of my whims. And, she stayed with the same firm for like 20 years. And they made her the head of design and everything. And whenever I said I want to try something, she said, go for it. And, so I think another good thing is have a partner who can take your quirks, really. But I said, I want to set up a practice, and she said, you should, because you're driven. So we set up a practice. We set up a practice with Fazana and me, and it was called Diffusion. D for Dell, F for Fazana, the fusion of the two, diffusion.
Yeah.
It's simple. And I was actually quite good at getting projects. So we went out and we got housing projects, we got kind of, all kinds of projects that a small practice would get. We had a little studio, which was actually our house, but it looked more like a studio. It's like we lived in an office in Shepherd's Bush. And so we were looking at our order book, and we had something like about 13, 14 jobs and projects. And then it boiled down to, right, we've got to sit here and draw these now. And I was looking at it thinking, I really don't want to do this. I like going out and getting the work. I just don't want to sit there and draw the work anymore. And I think at that point, I kind of thought, actually, I enjoy chasing things. And that's the driver for me. I'm excited by
The deal making.
yeah, yeah. And maybe maybe I was at that point that I could have hung in there and just probably I would now probably just be a partner of a practice where I'd be going out and dealing with clients. But at that time, I was sat there getting the projects in and then drawing them and then looking at the detailing. And then, I remember I was doing a restaurant fit out in Croydon, I think. And middle of the night, 2 in the morning, the owner or proprietor of the restaurant phoned me up and he said, my air conditioning's not working. And I thought, call an air conditioning engineer, not me. I designed your building, but you're the eyes for everything. And I kind of thought, okay, well, I've got to do something different. And then I started looking at this whole idea of motivation. And that's how Adrem came about, really. I started to look at what I could do with what I knew. And I kind of, I'd never been to an interview that I'd never got. And I kind of thought, well, maybe there's something in that. Maybe I can coach people a little bit in that. And it was in the days before coaching. And so Adrem began, and we basically got to a point where we grew over a period of time. And we got to a point where we had an office in Dubai, in Shanghai, in Hong Kong. And we were doing really well, actually. And then in 2008, the economic recession hit. And at that point, it all turned to dust. And when it all turned to dust, I kind of looked at this business that we'd built up over years. And I kind of thought, I was so focused on driving to grow, to build. We were like nearly 100 people around the world, and so focused on trying to achieve that I never thought to think what happens when a business fails. And I think no MBA can prepare you for failure. And it was incredibly humbling. And bizarrely, I'd been asked to give a talk at what's called the Architecture Foundation at the time in 2008. And they said, Del, we'd like you to come and do an inspirational talk for architects who are setting up practices. And the day before, I'd literally just closed my business because of the downturn. And my talk, I said, how can I tell you anything when I've just failed? And my talk was about failure, really. I talked about how humbling it had been to see everything disappear. And then you're sat scratching your head and thinking, what do I do now? And at that point, I kind of took the view, actually, everything is temporary. Everything comes and then it can go at any time. And the only thing you can do is, and a lot of people compromise their relationships with other people to be quite focused and cutting and, just so they don't fail. But actually, failure can come, and it's the best lesson you can ever have. And I still think it's the best lesson I've ever had. The most expensive lesson I've ever had, but the best lesson I've ever had. And so we reset up the business again. But meanwhile, this time round, after resetting, I thought, well, what is the purpose of all of this? What is the purpose of hard work? Money comes and goes. And the purpose of all of this is surely to be happy. So what makes people happy? What is the essence of happiness? Because that must be the essence of life, really. Happiness must be the essence of life. So I started to explore this idea of what makes people feel so good. And it really boiled down to one thing. Helping other people is the essence of life, of making you feel you have a value and you have a self-worth. So I went back to study this, and I did a master's degree in psychology. in positive psychology and well-being, and I just looked at the idea of how do you go from a person with a sense of almost depression and go to a sense of I can achieve things, I can build myself, and I can grow. And and that's kind of what I did. I went back and I studied this, and then started to get involved. I got asked by City of London to be a business mentor. So I started mentoring in this program between, I think, the City and University of London. And I threw so much into helping other people to succeed that I felt I had a duty to make other people not do the kind of mistakes I did, and if they were going to do that, to be able to accept it graciously and find a way through it.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I'm conscious of time, but I wish, in fact, I should say this on air, that I hope Farzana gets a chance to see this, that I do want to interview her as well, because I know she's an amazing story, and you both are, as I said, featured on BBPI, being an inspirational British Bangladeshis. So I hope that it's an open invitation for Farzana to sort of come on our show.
I'll tell her.
The key thing is, I mean, as you said, you've put so much energy in everything you do. The enthusiasm has got you to where you are, and obviously along the way you picked up so much experience. But that's mentoring. I mean, I know that whenever I approached you to help the BBPI, and especially our BBPI Foundation, some of the young British Bangladeshis who've approached our foundation, and I've kind of linked some of them up with you. This mentoring, a couple of years ago, you were awarded the best mentor in London.
Yeah.
This is not a paycheck. This is a personal satisfaction. It's a humbling experience to show that your energy, enthusiasm that has given someone else. You don't even know them sometimes. You've never met them, but they've come to your lesson. They've come to your lectures. Hopefully they'll be watching from tonight and getting some insight. I mean, when you've given that so much, and given, like you said, you've had a business, you had to close it down in 2008. We're now living in what is an uncharted territory. The COVID-19 has put a damper on everything. I mean, as a businessman, as a mentor, and a positive one who kind of gives positiveness to people, what advice and support can you say to people to sort of keep that spirit, to keep the enthusiasm, to keep the energy level flowing in a positive spirit? And I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to give you 4 or 5 minutes to sort of round this up.
I'll speed it up. I think main thing is there's an opportunity there. And if you, I mean, I'm in a similar position where, like so many business owners, we've seen our business contract again. It's been a real struggle in many respects to see so many kind of aspects of our companies, some cases close down, in other cases readjust. But I think you have to believe that you're going to pull back, you're going to do more, and you adjust the way you do things. Like doing these podcasts, for example, I think is a really great example. That a lot of employers would never consider letting their staff work at home, and now they feel, it's totally doable. So I think these things introduce new ideas. You just got to allow yourself to experiment with the ideas and say, I think as a business person, I can adapt and change and make something new. You're evolving as a business person, and it's part of that journey that you're having. It's a creative journey as a business owner, and you can't just expect it to be good all the time. This is a really horrible time, but you will come out of it, and you've got to believe you'll come out of it. So my advice is, look at your mindset, look at the way you look at the situation, and the situation eventually will change, but you just got to stay in there and keep beavering away to adapt your changes within your business, whatever the business is. Start adapting.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've have been watching us, I'm sure you feel completely inspired. And if you want to know more about it, there are opportunities for you to sort of go and do your own search on Google on Dale Hossain. And hopefully, and if you are starting a course at university, be it online, I guess, will, in sort of October time. I'm sure this is a taster of amazing lectures you will have, and inspirational teaching time you will have with Del Hossain. Del, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody at Be Inspired for taking your time this evening to join us. And as I said to you, I look forward to interviewing your, I was going to say equally better half, Farzana.
She's better than me.
You're both equally impressive. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and we hope to speak to you soon. Viewers, thank you so much for being with us on another episode of Be Inspired. As I said, what a remarkable figure. I mean, Del, his calm collectiveness and positiveness, giving energy and support to communities, and especially people who are wanting to get into the architecture world. We're really grateful for his time. We're grateful for you for watching at home. Until next time, be inspired. See you soon.